Hi, I'm John. Welcome to another product spotlight. Today we have a couple models from Class 1 Model Works. So let's get over to the workbench and take a look. So here's what we're looking at today. It's a pair of GSC heavy-duty depressed center flat cars. These are HO scale and they come from Class 1 Model Works. And before we get into all the price and everything else, I want to show you the packaging. And again, this is something, as you know, I don't usually do this, but what they do is pretty unusual. And I think it actually deserves to be shown because it's pretty cool. So the boxes look like crates, which on itself is kind of unusual. And they have this flap on the front, which when you lift it, you can see it has all these technical specifications about the model itself. And this is the same as the models that they made, the TWF-10 well cars. They also had this same kind of attention to detail in the packaging. And something they've done with these flat cars, which is kind of weird, I've never seen this done before, is the car is shown through the window at an angle. So you can see the deck. I don't know if you can really tell there, but that's really cool. Like I said, I've never really seen that done before. Maybe it has been done and I just didn't see it, but I thought that was pretty cool. So I'm going to take these out of the packages and we'll talk a little bit more about them before we do the in-depth look. All right, so I got them out of the packaging and this is what they look like. These are super detailed models. And the decks are according to prototypes. You'll notice if you look here that we have two different types of decks on these models, and we'll get into that more when we look at them in more detail. But I do want to mention that these models have a list price of $71.49, while their minimum allowed pricing is $64.99. So you should be able to get these for $64.99. If you're thinking that seems a little steep for a depressed center flat car, just hold that judgment until we get to the end, because you're going to be pretty flabbergasted with all the detail and prototype specific detail that they've included on these models. So what we'll do is we'll look at each one in a fair amount of depth, and I have some things that I need to show you. So we'll start with the flat car that's decorated for Southern, number 50005. And the first thing I want to mention to you is that when I opened the box, I found these pieces in it. And these are not detail parts that are to be installed by the end user, but rather detail parts that came off during shipping, which is not uncommon. Now, I've identified this area here as the place where this grill goes, or this walkway. It's a photo-etched walkway, so I'll be using some canopy glue to reinstall it here. And then this part goes on the underside, which I'll show you when we get to it. But in the meantime, just look at the paint job on this. The paint and markings are practically perfect on here. Now, there's not really a whole lot there, but what is there looks very crisp, and I don't see any gapping or anything like that. Something else to note while you're looking at this is that Class 1 Model Works has not only done a lot of research to make sure that these are accurate models, but they've also done a lot of work on having those prototype specific details that are appropriate for each one. So you'll find things like different types of jacking pads, or no jacking pads at all, if it's appropriate. Okay, so we're looking at the B end of this car. You can see that it has an uncoupling lever, which is a thin, separately applied part. The stirrups and grabs on the end of this car are also separately applied, as is the brake wheel and the brake wheel post. This is really detailed. And if you look on the other side of that coupler, you can see that there's a hose on it. So there's a lot to look at here, and while we're looking at it, I want to mention that these are Caddy compatible metal knuckle couplers. Okay, and I just wanted to give you a quick look at this end from this angle so that you can see the level of detail in the air hose. And now here's a quick look at the other side of the car. Something else I want to mention while we're looking at this car, because it'll be easier to see, is that it has rotating roller bearing caps. And there's different cap styles on the trucks. Depends on the prototype. And a look at the other end. So here's a brief look at the top of the car, and as I mentioned before, these are etched metal deck gratings. This is the one I still need to replace, obviously. Those are separately applied parts that get inserted in there, and boy does that look good. Some of these models have wooden decks, like the one we're about to look at, but we'll get to that when we get to it. Okay, so we're looking at the bottom, and I'm having to be really careful because I don't want to break the brake wheels off. But I do want to point something out, which is that piece I showed you that came off, that looks like this. You can see, if you look over here, that's this piece. And there's one missing on this side. So I'm going to just canopy glue this back into place when I'm done showing you the car, and I'll put it here where it belongs. But I did want to show you the bottom of the car because you can see that there's a lot of detail in the trucks. Something else I'll mention while we're looking at the bottom of this car is that it has this brake detail underneath, which consists of the reservoir as well as some associated piping down there behind the truck. There's a lot of detail on this car that's hard to see unless you know to look for it. So here's the bottom of the ATSF car, and you can see it has the same level of detail in the trucks, as well as, if you look sort of under the truck from this perspective, it has that same level of brake detail as well. Now here's the top of the car. Do you notice anything different? Wood deck on each end. So again, prototype specific detail. I just wanted to point out, if you're paying attention, you'll notice that these are different jacking pads. The other one didn't have this kind of jacking pad. So we're getting into prototype specific detail. Not only is the jacking pad different, but it's in a different position as well on the car. So looking at the B end of the ATSF car, you can see similar detail to what we saw on the other one, including the separately applied brake wheel detail, stirrups, grabs, cut lever, uncoupling lever, and air hose detail. And now a quick look at the A end of the ATSF car from the other angle so you can see the hose detail. Class 1 Model Works has done an excellent job representing a prototype that really is just begging for custom loads. Now, with that in mind, I should mention Class 1 also has loads that they're going to have available for these cars shortly. And I got a little preview of these loads at the Rocky Mountain Train Show a couple months ago, and you're going to be really impressed with those too. So great job, Class 1. It's another super solid release. This is probably at least as good as the well car that came out earlier this year, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what else you guys come up with. Great job.